Welcome and good afternoon, students. Today we are learning about a personal injury attorney career from attorney Nathan Sosa. So before we start, let's do a quick check-in so that your teachers know that you are here for the event. And then if you have any questions you'd like to ask Attorney Sosa, but you need help with the wording, here's a great questions document to assist you. And then lastly, don't forget to complete the evaluation form. And as a reminder, let's be fully present. Don't play games on your phone, use your social media, or watch videos. And take some good notes, because I'm sure that he's going to have lots of interesting things to tell us. And then lastly, submit your evaluation. The evaluation is the only way that your attendance will be tracked and for you to get a career credit, which is a requirement for your graduation here in Oregon. So with that, I hand it over to Attorney Sosa.
All right. Well, Karen, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Really excited to be here and happy to share some information with you, which I hope will be fun and interesting at the same time. So first of all, a little bit about me. I am an attorney, as she said, here in Hillsborough. I live and work in the Hillsborough area, and I've been an attorney for 12.5 years. So I've practiced in a lot of different areas. I've helped people with criminal defense matters, business litigation, construction defect, and now I help injured people, whether it's themselves that have been injured or their property that's been injured. I help them navigate the insurance process, which might not sound really interesting, but it is going to be fascinating as we kind of go through, and I'll share with you some examples of the types of cases that I work on and some of the issues and challenges that we have. But before I jump into all that, I would like to know from the students here, what do you think of when you hear lawyer? What kind of things come to mind? So you can just enter those in the chat. Better Call Saul. Okay. Okay. Court, trial. Yeah. Great. All right. Anybody else? Things you think of when you hear the word lawyer. Public speaking, helping people with legal issues, suing someone. Yep. All part of this. Absolutely. So, okay. Well, okay. Someone very formal and firm. Okay. That can be. That is the traditional, lawyer, very, very stuffy, and somebody who is very tough and argumentative. Yeah, for sure. An advisor. Yeah, great. All of these are true to one degree or another. But what we're going to talk about today really is that being a lawyer, and more specifically being a trial lawyer, is about a lot more than that. There are so many different aspects of what it is that we do. So really what we do as a trial lawyer, and when I say trial lawyer, what that means is I'm going to contrast that with other types of lawyers that are out there. So there are many, many types of lawyers. So maybe after today's discussion, you might think, well, maybe being a trial lawyer isn't quite right for me. But if you're still interested in the law, you're still interested in those kinds of things, you can use your law degree to do so many different types of jobs. So types of lawyer jobs that there are some lawyers who just draft contracts. That is their expertise. They work with companies, they draft really detailed, generally pretty rock solid contracts for companies all over the world. So for example, here in the Hillsborough area, we've got Intel. Intel employs tons of lawyers because those lawyers are going to be drafting agreements and documents related to all the products that they sell around the world. So that is a type of lawyer. You have other lawyers that do things like intellectual property. So if you come up with an invention or something, you go to a lawyer, and that lawyer, one, is going to help you get that patented and trademarked, and they're also going to ensure that your rights to that product are protected. Now, they're not going to court most of the time, but that's another type of law that they're doing. Maybe you're working as a criminal defense attorney, perhaps, or you're working as a prosecutor. So those are other types of lawyers. Now, they do go to trial, but typically speaking, those are those are criminal trials, which are not generally considered trial lawyers. Trial lawyers are generally civil lawyers. But there's a whole other area of law, criminal law, that a lot of you are probably familiar with from television and otherwise. So that's another whole area that you can do. And then there are lawyers that work in government. They work in a series of policy positions, whether that's advising the government on energy matters or waterways or manufacturing or environmental protection. So really, no matter what area you're interested in, whatever subject you're interested in, there's generally probably a lawyer involved somewhere in that process. Now, what I do and what trial lawyers like me do is we represent mostly people who need help in some way. So this can be clients who have civil rights cases that they need help with, or they have consumer protection cases where maybe they purchased a car and it was a bad car and it was they need to hold the dealer accountable for that, or maybe they were injured on the job and it's a workers' compensation case. Or something along those lines. So there are so many different types of trial lawyers in terms of the subjects that they handle. I can't go through them all today, but the type that I do, as I said, is helping people navigate the insurance process. So I think that we'll jump into an exercise here in a second, which I think will kind of help make that a little more tangible and real. So okay, let's see. I am. Let me pick one of the students here, unless someone wants to volunteer. Who wants to be my fictional client? Or maybe we'll pick on Karen. How about we do that? Okay, okay, Karen. Okay, so Karen, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live? Where do you work?
I live in Tualatin, and okay. I work here at the School to Career program at the Chamber.
At the Chamber. Okay, great. All right. Well, let's say that Karen is heading home from work one day, and she's heading down to Tualatin, and she is at a stoplight, and somebody runs into the back of her car. Right?
How dare they?
Right. So runs to the back of her car. What questions, and these are for the students, what questions would you have in terms of the situation? What questions do you think she might have once that's occurred? Okay. All right. Well, Karen, let me ask you this then. What questions would you have in that situation?
I would want to know if they are insured.
Okay.
If they have auto insurance. And I would want to know why the heck they ran into me.
Okay,
what
sure.
was going on.
Okay.
And I'd want to know how it is that I get whatever my injuries to myself and damage to my car that, and you know, yeah, that we're taking care of.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Got it. So one, we're trying to figure out what in the heck happened here. How did this occur? Why did this person hit her? What was going on? So that's part of what I do as a trial attorney. Is I'm an investigator. So I am asking questions. I am conducting interviews. I am reaching out to witnesses. I am obtaining video footage, whether it's maybe a dash cam on her car, maybe it's a dash cam on the other person's car, maybe it's a surveillance video from a business that was nearby. Mm-hmm. So I do a lot of investigating, trying to figure out what in the heck happened and why. Okay, so that's one thing. Secondly, she is wanting to know, well, what do I do about my car? My car has now been damaged, and what am I going to do with that? So as somebody mentioned in the chat, I am an advisor. So I am helping guide her through that process, helping to make sure that she gets her vehicle taken care of, that it's taken to a body shop and it's repaired properly, and that things are done the right way, and ensuring that if it isn't, that we're able to deal with those situations. She mentioned about medical, wanting to know who's going to pay her medical bills and how is that going to be taken care of, who's responsible for it. So that's what I'm helping with as well. I'm helping to ensure that her insurance company is involved in the process and that they're processing those medical payments and everything's being handled the right way. And then ultimately, I mean, she's going to have an impact on her life. So while she's recovering from this injury, there are going to be things that she just can't do because she's hurt. And there are going to be things that maybe she can do, but that are really difficult now because of those injuries. And if, let's say, unfortunately, poor Karen is involved in a more serious crash and maybe she can't work anymore. And how is that going to affect her? How is that going to affect her family? How is that going to impact her ability to work at the chamber on an ongoing basis? And how does she get compensated for that? So these are all things that I'm helping to determine, and that I'm working with her. I'm working with her doctors. I'm talking to people that are close to her, and I'm getting all this information. And ultimately, my goal is to try to make sure that she gets the resources from the other side's insurance company to make sure that she's going to be okay. But if we can't do that, if the insurance company is just not willing to work with us, is not willing to pay what's fair and reasonable, then we're going to trial. And that's ultimately where we wind up. And that's why we're called trial lawyers, is because we are now in front of a court, in front of a judge and jury. And then another part of my job comes into play, which is storytelling. I am telling the jury her story. I am telling them what happened to her. I'm telling them why it happened. And I'm telling them the impact that it's had on her. So there are a lot of different roles that we have as lawyers, where we are finding information, we are processing that information, we are making sure things are taken care of, and ultimately we're trying to make sure things are handled the right way, and telling that client story in the most effective way possible. And whether we're telling that story to an insurance adjuster perhaps, or we're telling it to maybe another lawyer who's acting as our arbitrator, or maybe we're telling it to a jury. Which is 12 people in the community that have been brought together to listen and to make a decision. So that is what we do, sort of in a nutshell. Does anyone have questions about that? About sort of the process and what it is that trial lawyers do? What happened if the client lied? I have had that happen a few times. I've been doing this a while now, but I've had a couple of clients lie, and it comes out. It will be revealed in the course of the case, hopefully sooner rather than later. But yeah, you can't get away with that. You just can't. It's because things will not add up. There's a way that all the evidence sort of fits together in a way that makes sense. And if something is wrong, then we will determine that, and it will come out pretty clearly. And then the client is going to be in real trouble, because if they've lied, then that's a crime. If they've tried to get money from an insurance company under false pretenses. So they could be facing some significant criminal repercussions if they did. So have I ever refused a client? There have been situations where I have not taken a case for various reasons. Sometimes the client's just not a good fit for me. You know, we have a conversation and it's just, it doesn't quite fit. So I turn down cases for that reason. Sometimes I think the client maybe can handle, if it's a smaller case, sometimes I think the client can handle it on their own, and I will tell them, hey, I think this is my best advice for maybe how you could resolve it on your own. And yeah, so there are just a number of situations where I don't take cases, but I try to help as many people as I can. Are there exceptions to the attorney-client privilege? That is an excellent question. So the attorney-client privilege means that anything that you tell your attorney, or that your attorney tells you in private, is protected. Nobody can ask about it. Nobody can force you to say anything about that. So that means that hopefully the client is being very, very honest with their lawyer about everything, because the lawyer needs to know the truth. Even if it's embarrassing, they can tell the lawyer and know that the lawyer is not going to tell anybody. So that's really important. The exception to that is if the client says, I am going to do something in the immediate future that is going to cause significant harm to somebody else. The lawyer is bound to try to stop that, and then to report that if they believe that it's going to happen. So if you give the client bad news and the client says, well, I'm going to go over to this person's house as soon as I leave here, and I'm going to bash them right in the face. that's something where the lawyer, hopefully they can talk them out of it. But if they can't, that is a situation where they're allowed to break the attorney-client privilege. If it's going to be imminent, significant harm to somebody else imminently. So, yeah. Okay. Well, gosh, I'm sure you have some questions. I mean, you signed up for it, so I'm happy to answer any other questions in terms of sort of the day-to-day of what I do and other things you might be wondering that you were always curious about as you're sort of thinking about maybe wanting to become an attorney in the future. Okay, what is the typical day in your work life like? Okay, so I work mostly in my office. So Monday through Friday, I am typically here in my Hillsborough office, and I am handling phone calls. I am drafting emails. I am keeping an eye on all of my cases and seeing how they're going, making sure that everything's being handled the right way, because I do have a staff that is also working with me to make sure that everything is on track. I am drafting legal documents. So whether that's a motion or an arbitration brief or some other sort of document that we're going to be filing that is going to be relevant to one of my cases. I'm doing research and investigation on my cases and figuring out if there are legal issues, what are those legal issues, and what is the answer to those questions that arise out of it. And so that's mostly day to day. And then I am also going out and meeting people in the community, because that's how you get clients as a trial attorney. Is the clients typically don't just often walk in the door. Sometimes they do, but often you're out there and you're networking with people. So and I do a lot of networking in the community. I'm always at events. I'm always talking to people. I'm always staying engaged. And I'm involved in a lot of different activities beyond just being a lawyer. So that people know who I am. People know that I'm available. And often when you're out there in the community, and I do a lot of nonprofit work and I do a lot of other sort of community work, people will come up and say, hey, you're a lawyer, aren't you? Yeah, I have a question. And that often prompts those conversations where if it's something I can help them with, that's great. And if I can't, then it's something I can refer them to another lawyer who can. It's not an issue that I work on. So yeah, so in a weekly basis, that is what I am doing. Working in my office, making phone calls, drafting documents, doing research, and networking. Now, less frequently, maybe a couple of times a year, I do have a trial. We're not in trial all the time. We're in trial maybe every 6 months or so. And that's when we, dress up in the suit with the tie. We go down to the courthouse. Hopefully now that COVID is waning, we will actually be back in the courthouse again. And we're actually there in trial doing that kind of thing. So that's really exciting. It's fun. So that's hopefully something that we're going to start doing again. I haven't had any trials since COVID started. So just because everything was shut down. But that is something else that we're doing. And then also we're doing other types of work, arbitrations, which are like trials, but less formal. We're doing depositions. We're doing a lot of other things as well, sometimes outside the office where we're traveling to different offices and we're doing that type of work. So that's a little bit of a glimpse into what we do day in and day out. All right. Okay. How stressful can your job be? So being a lawyer can be stressful. It often is. In my line of work, what's most stressful is that people are coming to me when things are going really badly for them. They're hurt, they're scared, they're worried, they're stressed out because they're in pain and they can't work and their car is wrecked. And some of them aren't sure if they're ever going to be able to go back to work. Some of them aren't sure if they're ever going to fully recover. And so a lot of those feelings come up, and there are certain things I can do for them to help, but I can't fix it all. So I think the most stressful part of my job is when the clients are really upset and they want things to be better. And sometimes we can help them make them better. by getting resources and connecting them with people who can help them. But there are some times that you just can't. I've had clients with permanent brain injuries, and we can help, but we can't undo what happened. I've had clients who've lost legs, who've lost arms, who've suffered permanent spinal damage with their wheelchair for the rest of their life, and they're really upset about it. And like I say, there's some things we can do to help, but we can't undo what happened. And I think that's the most stressful part sometimes, is just really caring about them and knowing that we can only help so much. Okay, how did you decide what type of law you wanted to practice? Great question. So I started out actually when I was 17. As a high school student, I had participated in mock trial. That was my introduction to the law. So we worked with an attorney. This was down in Las Vegas. There was an attorney who volunteered his time to come coach our mock trial team. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's where you get a fake case. And as a high school student, you get to pretend to be an attorney for this case. And you get to, at the end of the term, we got to go down to the courthouse and we got to dress up and we got to actually do a fake trial in a real courtroom in front of a real judge, which was really, really cool. And I thought it was like the most incredible thing that I had ever experienced. Now, I didn't know that I was going to be an attorney. I thought I was going to be a high school history teacher. That was what I thought I was going to do. And I fell in love with this. I thought it was so much fun. And so I was on that team for 3 years. And then when I graduated, the attorney found me. I was working at the grocery store, and he said, hey, you're going to start college in the fall. And I said, yeah. He says, do you want a job? I said, doing what? He says, oh, I don't know. Come down to the law firm, we'll figure it out. So I started out working at a big firm, and as a teenager, and I was going to college and I was working at the firm, and I was just opening mail, and I was giving people coffee, and I was filing things in the right file and running things to the courthouse. And so I got to observe a lot of different lawyers doing a lot of different types of law. And I got to see which ones I thought were interesting and which ones I did not. And then when I became an attorney, as I said, I started doing sort of a lot of different types of law. So did a little bit of criminal defense, and I liked some parts of that. I didn't like other parts. Construction defect, where you have a home that's been built and there's problems with the house, and you're upset about it. I did that too. And again, parts I liked, parts I didn't. And then I did business litigation, which was also very interesting. I got to work with a lot of different businesses and find out what was going on with their business, and if they had legal problems, what we could do to help. But I started taking more cases for injured people. And the reason I really liked that was because they came in and they were really upset, and it was very personal to them. It was their life. Their life had been affected. And when I said, I can help you, I felt great about that. And that's one of the main reasons I still do this type of law, is knowing that the work that I do is helping a person. Each client is a person that I'm helping. It's not a big company that I do good work for, and okay, it's just thousands of people, they're, oh, okay, great. It doesn't mean as much, to a company when you do a really good job for them, generally. But when you've done a really good job for a person who's really in a tough position, and they say thank you, and they shake your hand, or they hug you, or they cry, or it means a lot. And so that was something I really enjoyed about the work, is being able to know that I made a real difference in the life of a person. And that's why I started doing it, and that's why I continue to do it. So yeah, and it's also fun too, because you're representing a person against an insurance company. Insurance companies are kind of big and scary, and they've got tons of money and lots of resources, and so there's kind of that feeling like, oh, it's just we can stand up to them, we can do this, and it's kind of a cool feeling. And when you've done a good job and you've won against really tough odds, it's a pretty neat experience. So that's one of the reasons I enjoy it so much. Okay, how do you get clients, and do you go to court for trial? So the clients you get those in a lot of ways. So like I say, one of the main ways that I get clients is just being out in the community a lot. I am always out there going to events at the chamber. I am going to events with other groups. I am volunteering with organizations, and I'm out in the community a lot. So the more people know you and the more people get to know you and they hopefully like you, and they learn more about what you do, the more that when something happens, they'll come to you and say, oh, hey, you're a lawyer, right? Can you help me with this issue or that issue? And like I say, sometimes we can help them. It's an issue that I work on. Sometimes not. If it's an issue they need a will drafted, or they're going through a divorce or something else, that's not really what I do, but I can connect them with another attorney who does. So that's often how I get clients. We of course have a website, so people go online and they look for us, they look for attorney, and they find us that way oftentimes. I also get referrals a lot. So previous clients are some of the best referral sources, because if you do a good job for somebody, well, all of us know people. So if I do a good job for someone and 2 years later, their neighbor or their family member or their friend has a problem, they'll say, oh my gosh, Nathan did such a good job for me. Here's his number. And so I get a lot of clients that way, is just word of mouth. So it takes time, of course, to build up your reputation and to get out there in the community and get to know people. But that's how it works. So yeah, and then going to court for trial, yes. As I say, about twice a year, we do go to court, roughly. Sometimes it's once a year, sometimes it's a few times a year, but we do go to court for trials. And that's where the action happens. At the end of the day, if we're not able to get it resolved, is we go down to the courthouse and we put it in the hands of 12 jurors and we let them decide what's fair. So how many cases do you typically have at a time? It depends. Some lawyers that do what I do, they have only a few really big cases. So there are some lawyers I know who only have 5 cases, but each of those 5 cases is really big. And by big, I mean their client is in a really bad situation, needs a lot of help, very complex, many doctors involved, many other things going on with that person. And so they have a lot of work they have to put in on that one case. So they can only have a few of those cases at a time. And then there are other lawyers sort of on the other end who have, many cases, and they have maybe a lot of staff, a lot of other lawyers who are helping them process those cases of all different sizes. So it really depends on what you practice. There's different models, there's different strengths and weaknesses to each of those situations. Me, I'm kind of in the middle. At any given time, I have somewhere between 30 and 50 cases that I'm working on actively. And some of them are pretty significant. I've got cases right now that probably $1 million cases. And I have other cases that are fairly small, maybe $5,000 cases where the person wasn't that badly hurt, but they need help and they need us to kind of help them through the process. So, I work on all of those, and I'm happy to help as many people as I can. Okay, what education pathway did I take? What classes would be most helpful to focus on for high school students? Okay, so becoming an attorney is a fairly straight line in terms of what you need to do. One, you have to get through high school, graduate high school. Then typically you have to go to college and you have to get your degree in college. And then from there, you apply to law school. Most law schools do require you to have a 4-year college degree. Most of them, not all of them. So there are situations where you can get into law school without the 4-year college, but most of the time, that's what you're doing. Now, the good news is you can get a degree in college in whatever you want and apply for law school. There are people in law school who have degrees in biology. There are people who have degrees in philosophy, in business, in any subject you can think of, art. It just depends. Music. So whatever it may be, whatever your passion is when you get to college, if that's the route you're going, I would say that would be what you focus on. And then if you decide to go to law school, that can be helpful to you when you get to law school, depending upon what your area of emphasis is going to be. So for example, if you loved music is just, you love instruments, you love to play, you love to listen, music really, really well, but you want to become an attorney. Well, you can become an attorney who represents musicians. who is helping protect the intellectual property of songs, for instance. You can work for, I don't even know if we call them record companies anymore, but you work for companies that produce music. So those are, it just depends on whatever your passion is. And so that's the cool thing about law school, is you meet people from so many different areas of interest, and we see where they ultimately take that. And sometimes, you know, you get a degree in college and you become a lawyer, and your degree doesn't really affect what you do every day. For me, I was a political science, and then I switched to history. So I was a history major, and when I went to law school, history was actually really, really helpful for me for certain subjects like constitutional law. I understood the Constitution. I understood the history of the Constitution and why it was the way it was and what was happening in our country's history at that time. So that was really helpful. But there were other subjects that other people had more expertise in law school because of what they had studied in college. So yeah, you can really take any path to get there, but yeah, that's what you need to do. So in terms of high school, what subjects can you do and what things can you focus on? What I will say is this: to get through law school, you have to know how to read and write really well. That is crucial, because you are reading a ton of information and you are writing things. You are writing papers, you are writing memos, you are writing on your exams. A lot of what we do as lawyers, and particularly as law students, is lots of writing. So you have to be able to express yourself clearly and hopefully succinctly. So that is something I would say, if you're at the high school level, you need to be focusing on making sure that you're getting a lot of practice with that writing and communicating and researching and that kind of thing. So as a history major, it was really helpful because that's what I did. I read a lot of books on history, and then I would write essays on them. And that was super helpful when I got to law school. Some of the people I knew who were science majors, they struggled a little bit with that because that's not what they did a lot of in college. They focused more on labs and other things. So they still were successful, but it was maybe a little more difficult. So it just depends on what your skill set is. Okay, is being an attorney your first choice of a career? If not, what was your first choice? So I thought I was going to be a high school history teacher. That was what I thought I was going to do. That, and I wanted to write novels. I thought that would be like the coolest job ever, right? You wake up and you think of a cool story and you write it out, and then you get it published, and you know, it's just, oh, it's so awesome. I thought that was going to be what I was going to do. But then in high school, when I found that mock trial team, it changed the trajectory of my life. And so that has now allowed me to not only be an attorney, but also to go on to do a lot of other things. You know, as an attorney, you know, you have certain skills that allow you to do other types of work. So for example, in addition to being an attorney, I'm also a state legislator. I'm a state representative for a district in Hillsborough and North Plains. So I am able to go down to the Capitol, and I'm able to vote on laws in the state of Oregon, and I'm able to help effectuate change in a positive way down there. And a lot of the skills that I had as an attorney were very helpful with that. So yeah, I mean, once you have a law degree, you don't have to always become a trial lawyer. You can do a lot of things. My wife works as a researcher for the government. So she is able to use her law degree to do something completely different, but that is really, really important as well. What do you wish you knew and didn't when you first contemplated this career? The most important thing that I would have told myself when I was younger is it's really important for you to not be so afraid and to go out and talk to people and meet people and build up that network. Because what I didn't really grasp until later on in my career as a student was, when you're a student, you can talk to anybody. I mean, you just go, hey, how are you? I'm Nathan, I'm a student, whether it's high school student, college student, law student. As a student, they'll let you pretty much anywhere because you're learning. And people generally are flattered that you want to learn about what they do and you're interested in them and interested in their journey. So that was something I didn't realize at first. So I was nervous. I would sometimes go to events and you know, you don't really say anything and you look at your phone and act like you're really busy, even though you're not, because you're scared to talk to people because you don't know what to say, and they're strangers, and these are people who are older than you, and they're professionals, and it's intimidating. So if I could go back and talk to myself, I would say, don't be scared. Just go up, introduce yourself, say hello, shake their hand, tell them who you are, tell them that you're a student, and ask them questions and learn as much as you can. Because asking people questions is a great way to connect with them. And then if you have a good connection, if the person's polite and you're having a nice conversation, most professionals, particularly lawyers or judges or people like that, they have business cards. You say, hey, you know, this has been so nice. Thank you so much for talking to me. Can I have your card? Your business card, and they'll hand you their card, and then you follow up with them. You know, go out, ask them if they'd like to have coffee. Ask them, you know, if you can reach out to them again. You know, if you're a high school student, hey, you know, when I get to college, do you mind if I reach back out to you? I'd love to learn more. People are flattered when you say that. They really are, most of them, and they will very freely give their time. I do it all the time. I talk to students constantly, undergraduates, law students. I'm a mentor. I'm a youth mentor for multiple students. I'm in charge of the law school outreach program for the Oregon Trial Lawyers Association. So I'm always talking to students. I'm always available. So I give out my business cards all the time. And we have coffee. We have check-ins via Zoom. We do those kinds of things because people have questions. I just had lunch with a young man last week. He said, hey, I'm interested in becoming a lawyer. I just graduated college. Can I come talk to you? And he had talked to me a few years ago. And he said, hey, do you remember me? I said, I do. And he said, can we have lunch? Sure. And I bought him lunch. So I would say, don't be scared and take advantage of those opportunities, because the reason why that's so important is because once you, whether it's getting into law school, to get into law school, sometimes you need a letter of recommendation. And if you know a judge or a lawyer or somebody who's talked to you a few times, who likes you and says, oh, yeah, I know them. Sometimes they'll write a letter for you that says, yeah, this person I think would be a good law student. Or whatever it may be, or maybe after law school, you need a job. They're a great resource. They can connect you. Just remember, everybody knows other people, and you don't know how powerful that can be until you put the word out. And yeah, I've helped many, many students get jobs that I had known over the years. So very, very powerful. Okay, if a client sues someone and got awarded $100,000, does the lawyer get a portion of that? How does the lawyer get paid? Excellent question. Lawyers get paid based on the type of law that they do. So if you are a business attorney, for example, most of the time, a client comes to you who is a business and says, I have a problem. I have a contract with this other business, and this other business isn't doing what they said they were going to do. Generally speaking, the lawyer would say, okay, I think this case, we can probably get it resolved for somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 worth of lawyer work. I think. Give me $5,000. We're going to put it in a bank account, and I'm going to work on your case and track all my time. And every month, I'm going to add up how much time I spent, and I'm going to multiply it by my hourly rate, which can vary from say $250 an hour to say $500 an hour. It can get expensive, and we'll bill against that until that money is gone, and then you can put more money in. That's called the hourly rate. That's how a lot of business lawyers get paid. Is client puts a chunk of money, they bill their hours against it till the money's gone, and the client puts in more money. So that's one way to do it. If you're a criminal defense attorney, generally the client comes in and says, I've been charged with a crime. I need help. I don't want to go to jail. The lawyer in that situation generally will say, all right, based on the seriousness of the charges against you, I think it's going to be this amount of work. I want you to pay me what's called the flat fee up front. So for a criminal defendant, say you've been charged with driving under the influence, that's going to be $5,000. They get $5,000, and the lawyer does as much work as is needed to get that case successfully resolved for the $5,000, and that's it. For what I work on, it's called contingency. So exactly as you said in the scenario, I get a percentage of what the client gets if we are successful. So if a client comes to me, poor Karen in her car accident comes to me and says, oh my gosh, this has been terrible. My car's been messed up. I couldn't work for a year and there were all these problems. And we ultimately settle her case for $100,000. I get a percentage of that, which is generally 1/3 is what's typical in my industry. So in that case, my firm would get $33,333. She would get $66,667 minus costs and any outstanding bills and things. So that's how that would work. So there are different models depending upon the type of law that you do of how a lawyer gets paid. What did you get your undergraduate degree in? That would be history. How many years is law school? Law school is between 3 and 4 years, depending. I've heard some people who are really ambitious get it done in 2 years, but I think that would be really, really difficult because of how much work they're giving you. Generally, it's 3 years if you're going full time. And full time is basically 4 days a week or 5 days a week all day is a 3-year program. But if you are only doing part-time, let's say you're working during the day and you're going to school at night, they generally will stretch out to 4 years. So after you graduate high school, if you've got 4 years of college, and then you've got 3 to 4 years of law school, anywhere from 7 to 8 years after you graduate high school before you become an attorney. Does this career provide the opportunity to balance time between work and family? It does. That can be challenging. Work-life balance is difficult sometimes because when clients are in crisis, they need help. And most of the time, as an attorney, you want to help them. You want to make sure they're okay. And so there are definitely times when you're working a lot and you're having to put, particularly if there's a trial coming up, there's a lot of extra work that goes into putting on a trial. Or a big hearing that's coming up, that kind of thing, you're putting in a ton of work. But the good news is, as a trial attorney, you do mostly control your own calendar. So for me, for example, I can say, okay, I'm going to work really, really hard Monday through Friday this week, because on Saturday and Sunday, I'm taking the weekend off. Well, I have control over how much work I'm going to do Monday through Friday. I can book extra appointments. I can stay late if I need to. So yeah, it's just, you do have a certain amount of control, and it it depends on how many cases you have. It depends upon those deadlines of trials and things coming up. But most of the time, it's pretty manageable. I'm able to do, as I say, volunteer work. I'm able to serve in the legislature, so I'm able to do a lot of other things in addition to being a lawyer. But it just comes back to controlling your calendar and making sure that you're setting aside time to do the work, and then being efficient when you have that time set aside, you're actually doing the work. So yeah, it is difficult, but manageable. You still want to write fiction? I do, actually. So here's the funny part about that. I actually wrote a lot of fiction during the pandemic, because we were stuck, right? We were stuck at home. We couldn't, I couldn't even come to my office. I was working out of my bedroom. My wife got the actual office at home. So I had my fold-up table in the bedroom and all my work stuff on there. So yeah, there wasn't a whole lot else you could do. So I wrote a ton of fiction, and I did actually try to get some of it published, and realized that getting stuff published is actually really, really difficult and very competitive. So that was not as easy as I had hoped it would be, and it made me grateful a little bit that maybe I chose the right career, because trying to get work published is really hard. And when your story's been rejected by like 30 publishing places, you're like, oh God, I thought my story was good. So yeah, that's kind of a tough, it's tough. It's tough. I have great respect for writers, particularly now, seeing what they go through.
Hey, you can self-publish.
You can. I did look into that, and then I was like, oh gosh, that seems hard too. So yes, I am not yet published, everyone, but hopefully someday. This will be my retirement quest, right, to get my work published. If I contemplated becoming a judge, I have not. There are many colleagues that I know who really want to become judges, and many of them have become judges. And I think being a judge is amazing. It's amazing work. You're able to really help ensure that justice is being done. So yeah, it's great work. And anybody who's interested in doing that, that's a whole other conversation of how to become a judge. There's a whole process for that, and what makes you a good judicial candidate. So there's lots to talk about there. For me, I was more interested in helping to create policy as a political leader than I was sort of ruling on laws as a judge. Because being a judge, you're limited in that way. You have to follow the law, and your job as the judge is to make sure that the law is being followed. And for me, I was like, well, I think I'm more inclined to want to try to change the law than I am to being a judge and just making sure that the law itself is being properly followed. So just a preference, but being a judge is great work, and I have tons of respect for how hard they work and their role in our system. What is the most important soft skill in this career? I think for me, it's empathy. Really caring about the people you're talking to. Because it's easy sometimes to get really busy and you've been a lawyer long enough, you've seen so many cases, you've seen some of these issues so many times, like, in Karen's case, if she's got the car accident, I know what's going to happen in her case mostly. Like, I know what the process, I know how it's going to go. I know all the different steps and how it could play out. But Karen doesn't know that. And if she's hurt, she's scared and she's frustrated and she's in pain. And her coming to me and saying, look, I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, how am I going to get to work? And am I going to be able to work? And if I can't work, I could lose everything, and I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. I'm going to lose my house, and there's my whole life savings. Clients can get really, really upset. And I think that some lawyers, when they've done it long enough, they say, oh, don't worry, we'll take care of it. But really realizing that for the client, mostly, this is the first time they've ever been through this. And for them, it's really scary. And so being able to take a step back and say, okay, here's how I can help you. Really listening to what they're saying, really caring about what they're going through, and then trying to be compassionate and helping them get through the process, and realizing that it's very difficult for them. So I think empathy is a really, really important skill. And some of the lawyers that I've met, some of them don't have it. And I think it makes them less effective, really, because even in trial, jurors know when you're empathetic, they know when you care, and they know when you don't. Jurors are very smart. They pick up on things. And so I think really being sure that that's genuine is important. Absolutely. Do most lawyers accept clients based on how much money they get? So that is an interesting question. For the type of work that we do, because we work on contingency, we are calculating from the beginning of the time we meet the client is, do we think that this case can be successful? And that's at least what I look at it as, right? Do we think that this case is going to be successful? Because if we take cases that we don't think are going to be successful, and many of them aren't, then we're not going to stay in business very long. So there are certain lawyers that will not take cases unless they feel that the value of that case is going to be really high. Those are some of those lawyers who I say only have a few cases, because that's how they say, well, I'm going to only take the really, really valuable ones, and I'm only going to focus all my time on those. So there are some lawyers that certainly do that. I'm not that way. I look at it as, can I help people? And can I do it in a way that is going to be beneficial to them, and also ensure that our firm continues to exist? So there are some cases that are very small, that people come to me and they say, hey, this just happened. I think I'm okay, but I'm kind of a little sore. And they treat very briefly. There are some cases where I say, I don't think you really need a lawyer. I can give you a lot of advice, and you can kind of work through this on your own. And I give them tons of advice to make sure they know the process. And some of them are able to get it resolved on their own. But other times, just depending on the situation, I will say, yeah, absolutely, I'm happy to help you, and go from there. So what kind of cases do you think would be the best if you are new to the job? So as a young attorney, or I should say a new attorney, as a new attorney, you are probably, wherever you wind up, are probably going to be doing a lot of different types of cases, because it's really good to have that experience. So for me, being the newest attorney at that firm that I was at, they gave me all the smaller cases that other lawyers didn't have time for, or just weren't interested in working on. So I did a lot of little small business cases. I did misdemeanor criminal defense work. So really, you start out working on a lot of those smaller cases. Each field of law has its own sort of challenges and its own learning curve. So there really is not an easy thing to start doing. Each one is challenging, but I think no matter what, you're going to start out working on smaller cases, whatever that looks like, depending on the field that you're in. There are certain jobs that are geared toward younger lawyers, newer lawyers. So at your bigger firms, usually they will have like a tiered system where you start out and they have a system for giving you those cases. So that's that. Now the problem there is that sometimes you're stuck in sort of those little cases for a few years before you're able to do anything that you think is like, oh wow, this is really cool, because the first few years you're focused on those little cases. If you're a prosecutor, you're a criminal defense attorney who's working as a public defender, they're also going to be giving you some misdemeanor cases usually to start out with. Doing what I do as a trial lawyer, often we have smaller firms. It's just the nature of our business. And so if you're a newer lawyer and you join a smaller firm, there really aren't a whole ton of cases where we're going to be giving you just the baby ones. You're going to be working on some moderate sized cases really from the beginning. So that's one of the things that I think is really cool about the type of law that I do, or any trial lawyer, whether it's, as I say, civil rights, consumer protection, workers' compensation, employment law, immigration law, family law, injury cases, malpractice cases, any of those areas. Generally a smaller firm, and generally you're going to be getting more moderately sized cases from the beginning, and you're going to sort of advance your skill set. It's a little scary, but you're going to be advancing your skill set, I think, a little faster in that way. And if your firm has bigger cases, you're probably going to play some small role in that, but you're going to get to watch your colleagues as they do the bigger cases, and you're going to get to help them. So there's a lot you can learn in that way. So I think that's pretty cool. Okay, since you are now a lawyer, do you write stories about being a lawyer? Actually, I don't write stories about being a lawyer. That's what I do all day, every day. So no, actually, I write a lot of fantasy sci-fi stuff. It's just kind of my escape. It's how I decompress from all the legal stuff, as I write stuff about people on other planets that have nothing to do with my day job. But there are some lawyers I know who read only lawyer books and books about being lawyers, and they watch TV shows about being lawyers. And I think, gosh, that's like all you ever do. It doesn't seem healthy, but that's just my opinion. Okay, since you are now a lawyer, oh, okay, I got that. Do you take pro bono cases? I have definitely taken pro bono cases for sure over the course of my career. Pro bono cases are great because you're volunteering your time to work for free, to help somebody who can't afford an attorney. Now, with the type of work that I do, I take cases on that contingency basis. So I help people, I get a percentage of if we're successful. So it doesn't matter in my current role, whether my client has a lot of money or no money. I can help them either way because I only get paid if we're successful, and I get paid out of the settlement. So I don't have clients in my field that can't afford me. Anybody can afford me. In that sense. But when I was working on hourly cases, yes, there were definitely times where I would help businesses, I would help other folks who couldn't afford the hourly fee or couldn't afford the flat fee for a criminal case. I was helping them for free. So yeah, I've definitely done that. It's really rewarding. That's really good work. I'd recommend you do it. So what's the difference of a law degree from an Ivy League school? Example, Yale, Harvard versus a regular school such as Lewis and Clark and Willamette. So that is a really, really good question as well. My opinion is that it depends on what you want to do. So the law school experience, what you're going to learn is going to be the same no matter where you go. I mean, it really is. The curriculum is basically going to be the same, more or less, no matter where you go, whatever law school that may be. But if you want a particular type of job, you want, for example, to be a clerk to a justice of the US Supreme Court in Washington, D.C., probably you're going to have to go to a top 10 law school. That's just my opinion. I mean, that's not always true, but saying I went to Yale, I went to Harvard, I went to Stanford, I went to Columbia, that type of thing on your resume is going to help you go to those types of positions. Or if you want to work at a very prestigious firm in New York or Los Angeles or something like that, maybe you're going to those upper tier law schools. But it's not necessary. You don't. If you want to be an attorney and you want to help people and you want to do really good work in your community, you do not have to go to the Ivy League school. I mean, there are very few lawyers that I know in Oregon. I think one that I can think of who went to an Ivy League school. So it's not necessary. But if there's certain jobs that you want, and most of the people who have them are from Ivy League, then that's some research you would do for sure. So, okay. Well, any other questions as we're wrapping up? We got 5 more minutes. So,
so as we end our career event, what is your words of advice for these students who wanted to be a lawyer?
I would say that for me, as somebody who grew up in a family where my mom never graduated high school and worked as a waitress most of her life, and I'm the first person in my immediate family to go to college, you can do it. If you want to be a lawyer, you can do it. And I tell this to all the students that I mentor. I say, it doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter what your family does. It doesn't matter any of those things. If you want it, you can achieve it. And it's going to take hard work. It's going to take dedication. It might not be as easy for you as it is for some other people who have different circumstances. But if that is your dream, pursue it. And do it because you have something in here that really is driving you to do good work. Some people do it and say, oh, I just want money. Well, okay, there's lots of ways to make money in the world. Law school is a very difficult experience. So know why you're doing it and hopefully do it for the right reason, and do it for a reason that is going to help you stick to it when it gets hard, because it will get hard. And don't give up. Don't give up. And everyone feels like at some point, I don't belong here. I'm not smart enough to be here. Any day now I'm going to fail. Everyone gets it, but I don't. We all feel that way. We've all felt that way. So yeah, don't give up. Just keep at it. And I will put I'm happy to put my contact info here in the chat. And yes, like I say, I talk to students all the time. So if you want to reach out to me, you have other questions, feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call. I'm happy to have coffee with you, do a Zoom meeting, whatever it may be. If you have anything else that I can help you with. Okay. So there we go. Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you spending some time, and I hope this was helpful.
Yes, I'll stop the recording.